Welcome back, friends. We've got Meg Daley, Dr. Meg Daley on the show today. I'm really excited to be chatting with you, but I'm not going to lie, I kind of wish we were doing this in person in Arizona.
I know. I thought of that actually when we scheduled this, or hell, like if I could have gotten over to Asheville.
I know. It's all right. Well, I'm excited that you're here. Why don't you just give the audience like a quick little debrief of who you are? You've got the doctor in front of your name. You're out in Scottsdale. You're running your own business. So who are you? What do you do? Who do you serve? How do you serve?
Yeah, so thank you for that intro. I am Dr. Megan Daly. I am a mindset and success coach. The doctor in front of my name comes from I was a doctor of physical therapy for 10 years. I still carry that title. I just no longer treat patients because along the way I discovered how much mindset and mental and emotional health play into physical health, and how if you don't have the mindset component down, it's like a snowball effect from there, right? So, and then add to that, the catalyst for my pivot was being my father's caregiver as he was going through lung cancer and hearing all of the regrets at end of life that he didn't live for himself. And so that was really the catalyst to me really deep diving into mindset. And what I do now is so deeply personal because I want no one else to have the same regret that he did at end of life. So it is my mission to help as many women in male dominated fields, so health, tech, finance, those kind of things. We're go-getters, we're hustlers, we are always striving, and really breaking out of the expectations of others and the shoulds, and helping you find your own path and that what that's going to look like for you to get to end of life and feel deeply fulfilled and like you had a life full of joy.
I love
So
it.
yeah, that's like who I am, what I do, who I serve. And then outside of that, like I'm a coffee shop addict, I'm an Enneagram 7, a snowboarder, dog lover, like catch me outside doing some kind of activity at any given moment.
Yeah, valid, accurate, or dance class.
Or dance class. Yes, very
Yeah,
true.
I love it. It's so fun seeing there. Okay, let's stick to this topic for 1 second before we dive in anywhere else, because this idea of
Yeah.
shooting all over yourself or expectations from other people, what's something tactical, tangible that you could tell somebody that's listening right now who goes, yeah, like I don't want to get to the end of my life and have regret either. And I feel like I'm currently living in somebody else's story, Meg, but dot, dot, dot. I'm scared. I feel like I should be doing this. I don't want to let other people down. What if it doesn't work out? Are there tactical mindset steps or tangible things that you can say, like right off the bat, just boom, here, start with this? How do you get over that?
Yeah, that is easily the biggest block, right?
Yeah.
For everybody. Anytime there is a should or an expectation that has dictated decisions in your life, that's a deep enough should that there's going to be fear coming alongside breaking out of it. There is going to be, and really what I have, like the clients that I work with, one of the first things that I have them do is really like deep dive journal on, okay, what is the fear? What are you scared of happening if you were to show up as fully yourself, if you were to let all of these go away? Because we have to get to the root of what the fear is first so that we can start to undo, because I mean, they really are, they're subconscious stories. So it's much deeper than just having like a one liner that you hear from someone and being like, oh, I'm good to go, I can take off now. No, like it's a lot of deep mindset work. So we've got
Yeah.
to figure out where the should is coming from, like what it's tied to, and particularly what's the fear of letting it go.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see, or did you see when you were practicing as a physical therapist, any correlation between this like mindset, fear, this should that we're talking about, have any correlation to the actual physical practice of, let's say someone's coming back from a surgery or an injury? There's a lot of fear, right? And I know I've gone through
Mm-hmm.
far too many surgeries. I've been in physical therapy far too many times. That's why I went to school for DPT. Um, but oftentimes I know I experienced fear, or I experienced a mindset thing that I would have to overcome in physical therapy when we're talking about the actual physical body and, doing a particular exercise or strengthening something or going for like the jump, it's like 8 weeks in a wheelchair and now you want me to jump and
Yeah,
it's so scary. So do you feel that there's a huge correlation between mindset with the physical body as well?
100%. It's probably even before I had that catalyst of being my dad's caregiver and realizing that I wasn't quite on the right path. Like I don't regret anything that I did, right? Because it set me up to where I am now. And I realized very early on in my PT career, actually even prior, you and I are very similar. We both went for the PT route because we had had multiple surgeries and we had been lifelong athletes. And so you quickly realize that the mindset is easily the hardest part of physical therapy.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
It is the hardest part. I can tell someone to do the exercises, but trying to get over that mindset hump of getting back to the activities that they love, that for whatever reason, there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? But the injury happened. And so now there's a fear around that moment that it happened,
Mm.
even though we know it wasn't that moment, right? It was like everything up and then that was the straw that broke the camel's back scenario. But like you said, going from wheelchair to then jumping again, if jumping or landing was what got you injured, there's a lot of fear around that. On top of that, a giant piece of the mindset that plays into rehab or physical therapy or anything that we have going on is your identity and the mindset that's wrapped up in identifying as an active adult or as a specific kind of athlete. Like, so one of my surgeries early on, I was in fifth grade and I very deeply identified as a soccer player. Like I wanted to be Mia Hamm.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up with this knee surgery that made like I couldn't bear weight on that leg for 6 weeks, much less play soccer. It took me 6 months to come back.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of mindset work that I had to do that unfortunately, like it wasn't as big then in the 90s as it is now to bring that into play. I kind of had to figure it out on my own as a fifth grader of like, what do you mean I'm not a soccer player? Then who am I?
Yeah.
And battling with that throughout my rehab.
I feel
And
like
I've
that's
done
such a
that
common,
countless times for my patients.
yeah. And that's such a common thing when the sport ends, right? We spend 10, 15, 20 years playing a sport, and that's so much of our identity. And then maybe you go to college and you don't play in college, or you have an injury, or after college. Or we interviewed an Olympian on the podcast, and she was talking about like, and when the Olympics were done, it was like that identity is gone, and that
Mm-hmm.
thing that she was working towards for years. Something that I love about you so much is your blend of science and woo, right? Like we can go there. You're literally a
Yeah.
doctor of physical therapy. It's all science, it's logical, it's right there. It's black and white. But also
Mhm.
sound baths and breath work and like all this other stuff, and you're really into it. And I love that about
Yeah.
you. Do you personally feel that? I know I read the book years ago, The Body Keeps Score. Do you feel that there's
Oh, I love that
trauma that
book.
happens within the body or like trapped emotions that happen within the body that's even like a deeper layer beyond the mindset stuff? It's like there's actually your body keeping score of injury, trauma, surgery, whatever it would be.
100%. So I have this one patient that I saw my second year of practice. So well before I got into the woo-woo stuff that I love using as the like classic example of this because it was so obvious. And it was the moment where I was like, oh, there's something here and I can't deny it. So like when I say I've been doing this work for significantly longer than I have actually been doing the work, like I didn't know I was doing it for the past decade.
Mm,
And this particular patient came in chronic low back pain, said it was a 12 out of 10, which like astronomical. It had been going on for like a decade. And I was still like a second year, relatively new, very pathoanatomical in my practice at that point. And I evaluated her and I could not find a single thing that made sense as a biomechanical reason for her pain. None.
yeah.
She had imaging that she was like showing me all like she had gone to multiple doctors and it was like I touch her skin and she jumped off the table. Like just nothing matched up.
Yeah.
And so I finally got to a point where I was like, okay, like throw in the towel. I didn't let her see this, but I was like, all right, I'm putting you on a heat pad. Let's try to just get some things calmed down. I gave her, honestly, to be fully transparent, a BS exercise that really wouldn't have her move a ton, just so I could have her think that she was doing something while I just chatted with her.
Yeah.
And she unloaded on me about some family drama that had been going on. And then that turned into unloading on me about some really deeper things that it was tied to in childhood.
Wow.
Now, what about me allowed her to feel safe to do that on day one? Maybe it's just my energy. But I'm so glad she did because I asked her afterwards, like, again, I had her doing like a little exercise. I was like, okay, how's your pain feel now? 0 to 10. She told me 6.
Wow.
She told me she had not felt anything lower than an 8 out of 10 in 6 years. And that is from one conversation, being able to unload her actual deep feelings.
That's crazy. Did she see the connection or not yet?
It took a while,
Yeah.
right? Like it was so deeply ingrained. I want to say it was probably 4 or 5 sessions later of just continuously giving her like exercises that I knew wouldn't do any harm,
Yeah.
and putting her on heat and just chatting with her before I was able. And right, as a clinician, like we know we can kind of get a feel for when someone's ready to hear it. And so I started asking her questions that allowed her to start to connect the dots.
Yeah. Which when you zoom out, 4 sessions is what, a month and a half? I mean, come on. She's been in pain for 6 years. And then in 4 sessions, it's like, that's incredible. I want to go back for a second. You said something before when you were navigating your dad and the loss of your dad. You said you had signs that you were not in alignment, signs that you were not on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
What were those signs? What was coming up? What was showing up?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things, and they weren't all in one, right? Like I had a few signs that would kind of happen, and then a few months later, I'd get another inkling because I get like one of the first things that I'll state is just like we just talked about with an athlete having their sport tied into their identity. I very much had my DPT degree tied into my identity so deeply. It took me a long time to really start to dissociate those two. And the first sign, honestly, was coming back, or the first big sign. I think I kind of knew, like hindsight's 2020. I feel like I knew the intuitive hits while I was talking with my dad about it. But after he passed and I came back to work and I tried to go back into the clinic space, it became very apparent that something was misaligned. I did not feel fulfilled. I did mistake it for grief for a while
I
because
was
there
just going to
is
ask
a
you that.
component of grief where,
Yeah.
yeah. So for a long time, the therapist that I was working with too was like, hey, we won't know just yet if this is just a, hey, I'm losing interest in something that's really meant for me, or if this isn't in alignment. And as time went on, it felt less and less in alignment, right? And I remember it was probably a year later, I had another like small injury of my own. And so I went to see a friend who's a PT who loves it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what he is meant to do. And I watched him as the patient and watched him kind of move and just like how he lit up. And I was like, oh, that's different. I like, even on my best days, I haven't felt like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that was probably the biggest sign. The other was just really like once I kind of saw that, being able to listen to my body and listen to my gut and recognize that at the time I didn't know what was meant for me, but I just knew that this didn't fit. And then you add on to that, I'm far too much. It's a running joke with one of my friends at the about the time I was making all these realizations. I had some friends that were opening up a franchise of cash PT clinics.
Mm.
And now this should have been my sign that I didn't necessarily need to go out and create my own cash clinic. Again, hindsight's 2020. But my buddy Zach, incredibly successful in this space, was creating these clinics with two of his friends that I also know. The two friends were chatting with me. They're like, "You're perfect for this clinic. Like, you can head up in Phoenix." And Zach was like, "Absolutely not." I was like, "What?" He was like, "You're a fantastic PT and you're a business liability. You would just ditch this and go to Austria for a month at a drop of a hat." I'm like, "Okay, you have a
Yeah.
fair point."
Valid. Valid.
So like having something where I'm in clinic, like having to work in that, no,
Yeah.
that should have been my biggest clue.
It's incredible self-awareness though that you had to see like, interesting, I'm not really lit up as this other person, right? Like I don't really appear on my best day in this way, and asking yourself deeper questions and being
Mm-hmm.
okay to sit with the answer, whatever the answer would be. That is not easy to do. And then to ultimately take the leap, right? To take the jump. And I know I experienced it as well. For me, I'm the type of person, I need to burn the bridges or burn the boats. Like take away the safety net and I'll figure it out. And that's definitely not for everybody. So if you're listening and that's not you,
Yeah,
this is
I'm
where
the same way,
self-awareness
and
is
I
key.
really don't like that. That's my way.
Yeah. But self-awareness is key
uh,
here. It's like if
yeah.
uncertainty is not one of your core values, don't do that, right? If certainty is one of your core values, then it's okay to have a plan B and like line up another job first. And it's probably the smarter thing to do. But for me, it's like, I got to burn the boats. So At what point did you decide, like, all right, I'm done. This is out of alignment for over a year. It's not grief at this point. I've sat with it long enough. I'm just gonna leave. I'm gonna figure it out. And what did that look like?
I would love to say that I did that really quickly, and I didn't. So once I realized, again, my identity was super tied up into it. And so originally I was like, okay, maybe I just need to set up something where I can create more time freedom for myself. So that's why I ended up opening up my own clinic January 2020. And so fast forward to 2021, I built it up to a six-figure clinic, but it's just me working one-on-one with patients.
Yeah.
And so the
The
amount of
irony.
energy that I was draining from myself,
Yep.
even though I had created the time freedom, right? Like I set my schedule, I realized very quickly that I could take off for 2 weeks in the clinic. Like, yes, it wasn't making any money, but I could also make enough on the front or back end to be okay. So I was like, oh, this is the answer, until I was hitting six figures and I was like, ooh, okay, this is my ceiling. And it's probably past my ceiling because I'm tanked. I hit burnout yet again. I'd hit burnout multiple times as a clinician in corporate healthcare. And so that was the like, okay, enough is enough. And then I took the next year, I kind of let my clinic float while I really figured out, okay, what is it? And it did take me a while to find really what was hiding in plain sight for me, right? I've been doing this mindset work. I've had people coming to me randomly for it, like some of my patients even. In 2022, I started to have patients mention like, oh yeah, I've been referring to you to people for years. Like I send all of them to you, not just because you're a good PT and I know they're going to help you physically, or you're going to help them physically, but they're going to learn from you. Like the eye-opening moment was one of my patients that had followed me for the entire decade of my career from clinic to clinic, was like, yeah, I'm referring my daughter-in-law to you because I know that she can just learn from you when you just talk to her.
Hmm.
She needs emotional resiliency. She needs the mindset shifts that you bring to the table with everyone. And I was like, wait, rewind, what? I do what? And so, I mean, that's just one piece of it. There are a lot of pieces around that same time that all pointed towards this.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the beginning of this year was actually the realization. I had been trying to kind of float the clinic. I signed up with you,
Yep.
developed a course to help other clinicians break up with burnout. And even that, it's like, okay, this is closer, but it's not quite it.
Yep.
Like I really love all these concepts, and I felt really, really drawn to do something even bigger. I found myself continuously pulled towards the high achieving females instead of just allied healthcare professionals. And so I finally, what was it? April, May. I think I was like, okay, I finally made the decision of it's going to be by the end of the year. I'm going to phase out the clinic completely and I'm going to switch, and this is going to be my thing. And the universe said, you're funny. Make it 30 days.
Oh.
So yeah, when I say I'm very much the burn the bridges, like if I don't do that, the universe likes to do it for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
yeah,
feel like that's always the
completely burned
case.
all the bridges, started from scratch at the beginning, like May, June.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing roller coaster since then to build this
That's
up.
so cool. That's so cool. I feel like we have a lot of similarities. I'm not going to make any assumptions. Do you identify at all as like a recovering perfectionist, a recovering, type A, high achiever,
100%.
go getter? Okay, perfect. So here's my question.
Yeah, I
Because
have a whole episode on my podcast about my childhood and like how those all developed.
yeah, yeah. Well, that definitely is me. And that's how I feel and identify. And as I've gotten older, I've been working on it more and more and more. So something that I've recently been geeking out on is this idea of just what is perfectionism? What is procrastination? So a couple months back, you actually put up a post and you said that procrastination is a manifestation of unaddressed stress. Now, I didn't warn you about this. It's just something that it hit me and I saved it. So I don't know if I'm not expecting you to regurgitate the post, but can you break that down? Procrastination is a manifestation of unaddressed stress. What do you mean? How do we overcome it? What is that?
Yeah. So it's so true. And what's hilarious is I had no idea you were going to bring this up, but right before this call, I even had this little download because I caught myself in like a perfectionist tendency doing something this morning and had this moment of like, who defined what perfect or right is anyways?
Yeah.
Like, I get to define that for me. No one else gets to. And so if I am feeling perfectionist and tendencies, it's because I'm allowing someone else to have defined what perfect or right is. So I love that you're bringing this up. Yes, procrastination is absolutely a manifestation of unaddressed stress. And how that happens is there's always going to be a reason behind why we're procrastinating, right? It could be the fear of success, it could be the fear of failure. Those are probably the two biggest ones that I see, but there's a lot of other fears or stressors that can be underneath that. So it sounds so silly and simple, yet it's really difficult to do this exercise. And a lot of times, if I have a little bit more time or someone has a little bit more time to dive into why they're procrastinating, I have them do 7 whys.
Mm.
And that's because, okay, why am I procrastinating? The first, probably even the second one, are going to be more superficial level, right? So, why am I procrastinating? Because I don't want to do this. Why? Why don't you want to do this? Because I'd rather do X. Why? Like, you have to like ask why, like the
Like a little
toddler that
kid. Yeah.
won't. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That like
So
won't
annoying.
isn't okay with your answer. Exactly. But you get to do that to yourself, which is just as annoying. And by the fourth one or so, you're going to have to start getting really deep. And by the seventh, you are going to have an answer as to what is truly underneath this. What do I really need to address? And what lessons do I need to unlearn? That's going to look very different for everybody. Now, if you don't, this is a process, right? Like I said, it's this annoying longer process. If you don't have time to go through all of that, save that for later when you do have time. And for right now, like, be annoyingly honest with yourself of what comes up first as to like what's the fear underneath it. Typically, like I said, it typically has to do with the fear of, okay, if I get this done, what does that mean? And you have to name the stress, acknowledge the stress, allow it to move through you. My favorite way to do that very quickly is to name it, feel it, and then full body shake. And then just set a timer for 1 minute. Like, pick one small part of the task that you want to do, set a timer for a minute. By the time you're done with that minute, you're going to have momentum to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you
Are
got to start.
you a fan of the eat the frog method? Like, do the hardest thing first, or no?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might have to do an exercise like this once or twice or even 3 times just to get going on that difficult task or that thing that's kind of like hanging over your head that you've been procrastinating. But once you get started, generally, like you said, there's momentum, which in that case, then the easier things that we love to do first, which are usually like mindless tasks,
Mm-hmm.
they can get done so fast afterwards, right?
100%. And depending, I will say there are a few times with clients where if it's something that they've been procrastinating on for a really long time, or if it's like, depending on what it is, occasionally I will say, hey, what's the one easiest? Like, what's the quickest win? And then go for like, get the win and then the eat the frog method. But yeah, I very much live by like, I do my hardest thing first every single day.
Yeah, I try to as well. I'm human, so there are definitely days where I slip into
Yeah.
like, I shouldn't have done that. That was so easy, return to Amazon. um, is there a threshold? I'm just thinking of like the calendar. Time's an illusion, but I'm thinking of like the
Mm-hmm.
calendar. Is there a threshold where it's like it's no longer procrastination? I mean, this has been a year that you're putting off starting the business. It's 6 months you're putting off writing the book. It's 14 years you're putting off having the difficult conversation with your parent. Like, is there sort of a line where it's no longer procrastination, but maybe now it's labeled as something different? Is it avoidance? I mean, I don't know.
That's a fantastic question. I I think if a decent chunk of time has passed, like in my head, so if I think of like physical therapy, like we have acute, subacute, and chronic. I mean, if we're past the 4 month mark, we label someone as chronic.
Right.
And in my head, that translates to this really nicely, right? Like, you can procrastinate for a certain amount of time, but if we're getting 3, 4, 5, 6 months, years, that's now avoidance. Either way, both are still going to have the underlying fear, the underlying stressors that
Mhm.
are waiting for you to address them.
Yeah.
I just think the more time that's passed, the harder it is to start. And the answer is still just as simple, right?
Yeah.
Simple doesn't equal easy, but now I do think there's the big point that I want to make here is being really honest with yourself. If you're procrastinating and it's getting to a point of avoidant that much, is it because it's not meant for you?
Right.
Like, is this actually something that you truly want to do? Or, I mean, full circle back to the stop shoulding yourself earlier. Is it something that you feel like you should do, that
Right.
you're supposed to do, that you're expected to do? Or is it really, truly meant for you?
And
That's first step. You have to figure that out.
yeah, and I think even using your seven whys here is so important because I'm just thinking through the lens of like I talk to a lot of business owners or aspiring business owners, right? I mean, hundreds and hundreds of coaches every single day. And from so many people, we hear that I've been wanting to start my business for 6 years. I've been trying for 4 years. I've been wanting to take a course for 2 years or whatever. And it gets to a point where I'm like, I'm not really sure that you want it. So if you can continue to ask yourself why, maybe you actually don't want to be an entrepreneur because
Mm,
it's not as glamorous as people think it is, right? It's a lot of work. And
no.
maybe it's the
Yeah.
freedom that you think it's going to give you. Maybe it's the money that you think it's going to give you. Maybe it's the significance that you think it's going to give you by, being Insta famous or something like that. So I think the questions of why here is really important too, as you're sitting between, am I procrastinating and perfectionism in this loop and shutting on myself? Or is it avoidance? Or is it just not actually for me? And it's other people's expectations. Have you ever read the book Expectation Hangover by Christine Hassler?
Ooh, no, but I will put
It's
that on my
so
list because
good.
that sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
It's one of my favorites. It's like love Christine. It's just one of those simple, like you get it after the first couple pages, but you consume the whole book anyway. And you're like, I know this already, but like I'm not doing this. I know this already, but I'm not practicing
Yeah.
this. And it's such a good one. So just shout out to Christine Hassler
Uh,
for that one.
that brought up there's a quote from one of my mentors in the PT space that I love, and it's people don't need more education, they need more inspiration.
Mm,
Like the example that we always use in courses that I would teach with him was people know they shouldn't smoke and they do it anyways. Why is that? Or people know that they should eat healthier and be active, but they don't. Why is that? Like, it's not more education. It's watching Rocky for the fifth time and deciding to go out for a run afterwards. Like, people need more inspiration. They know, like, right, the person who's stuck in that perfectionism loop at some level knows what they're doing. Like, knowing more education isn't necessarily going to help them, but that's hell, it's why I went into the mindset route, because all of the work I did to try to undo the loops that I was stuck in all pointed towards mindset is foundational.
yeah.
Like, you have got to have deep self-love, self-trust, self-worth, and really know what you want and what you stand for and what's really for you versus expectations and shoulds. Like, that's foundational before you can break through all of that stuff. And the whys will 100% start to unravel that for you.
So do you journal every day?
Pretty much. I just talked about this in a journal workshop that I did. And actually, a couple. I did like two journal workshops back to back, one myself online and then one for a retreat to help integrate everything that they had learned in the retreat. And I talked about consistency because I think, especially recovering perfectionists, we can get really hard on ourselves. And the reason that we might have a journal graveyard sitting in the corner of our house of like partially finished journals is because we get stuck in this, oh, I have to do it every day or else I'm doing it wrong. And so it creates a shame spiral, particularly if journals have calendars in them. Like, I personally don't have ones with calendars that like you have to write the date at the top, because if you miss a day, it's basically setting yourself up to shame yourself
Yeah.
that you missed. It's a constant, like, it's a visual reminder. And so I think it's important to recognize that. I think it's important to be consistent with mindfulness every single day. That may or may not be journaling every single day. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can journal. And so I know this is a lot. It's not directly answering the question. So I do journal every day, but it looks very different. Sometimes it's gratitudes. Sometimes I do gratitudes verbally or in my head while I'm walking, though, and I journal on a prompt. Sometimes I meditate and then just journal what came up during the meditation. Like, it looks very different, but I do something for mindfulness every single day.
Yeah. So you brought up this idea of, especially for the recovering perfectionist, right? The shame if you miss a day, and like the guilt that comes from that, and the just being so hard on yourself. I feel like there's two sides to every coin. And for me, I focused, or in the past, I have focused a lot less on I missed a day, shame, and more I did it, award. And so for me, something like journaling or meditating, I've gone through seasons because I've been doing both those things for well over a decade now consistently. And I have gone through seasons where those type of like morning routine rituals, they've just become part of my to-do list. And it's like, yes, I could check it off, award, blue star, check mark, sticker, whatever it is. Like, okay, cool, I did it. And when I'm catching myself, and maybe you're listening and you feel this, right? Like maybe someone listening is like, oh, this is how I've been feeling about my, whatever it is, fill in the blank, right? I allow myself the space to actually stop, because for me, I have come up to this many different times over the last decade where it's like, now I'm just going through the motions. And I don't think that this exercise is particularly effective, or like, yes, I'm giving myself the award for doing it. Or maybe there are days where it's like, if I don't do it, then I'm not worthy, not valuable, I'm not loved, all of those things. So, which would be like a shame thing. So again, here we go back full circle. It's the self-awareness, right? And it's the shoulding and removing the shoulding. And just because this particular guru and that mentor and this Instagram account told you that this is what millionaires do in the morning, this is what you need to do. What I would say is you need to create your own habits and rituals and be okay with cherry picking them. You know, we're both fitness people. It's like, I don't want you to cherry pick your exercises necessarily, but at the same time, here's a toolbox filled with tools. Learn how to use all of them. Learn when you're going to use those different tools and why you would use those, going back to your whys. And then when you feel like you need one, or you're interested in leaning into one, you know, use that tool. And if you want to put it down without any guilt or any, like you said, any shame or any explanation, right? Like we don't owe anybody an explanation, especially when it comes to our own thoughts or practices or beliefs. I always say like, no is a full sentence. Like I don't have to give you a reason why. It's just, no.
Yeah, there's the feeling, and this is one that I for sure still will catch myself feeling the need to over explain. And it's a trauma response, right? Like no one escapes childhood without some kind of trauma. You don't have to have big T to necessarily have it. And yeah, I agree completely. And that's something that I think is so important, to be really, really comfortable with saying no and not feeling guilt alongside it. And I'm going to kind of flip back to something that you said, like talking about the gurus, right? Because we all get kind of sucked into seeing things on Instagram and being like, oh, well, this is clearly how it's meant to be done, or how I should do. Again, going back to the shoulds. And I want to say, first and foremost, like every single guru that you see online is human. Like they have days where they mess it up, or they miss it. Like it's okay. And I think that was one of the freeing things for me when I started to realize that we're all human, we're all trying our best. It's something that I started to realize with all of my solo travels. Like you travel the world and you meet enough people and realize everyone's way more similar than we give ourselves credit for. And we all want the same things, right? Like we all want to feel seen, heard, valued, and feel free. And I think I love what you said about finding your own. Like really everything that I do is about helping someone find their own path. And that includes your own routine. Like what works for you is not going to look the same as the person next to you. And that's okay. And I believe it's truly important to give yourself that flexibility, right? Like I said, I'm consistent with mindfulness every single day, but I recognize that some tools are going to work better on one day versus another. And I'm also, I don't know how much you're into human design. I'm a manifester. So I'm not meant to have like the same routine all the time. Like that doesn't work well for me. So I need parameters of my routine and then have flexibility within that.
Learn the rules to break them. Right.
I think that's
it's
really
like,
cool. Exactly.
It's literally learning like how all the different paintbrushes work, and then like do whatever you want, flip it around and use the back end of the paintbrush, you know, and make impressionist dots or whatever. It's like, you know, is that what it's called? Whatever. I can't think of the name of the painting. Right. Is that impressionist? Or like the Aborigines, they like use the tiny end and they make dots to make beautiful paintings. Okay. So this is all kind of also blending into this idea of boundaries, which I know is something huge that you love talking about. And I love hearing you talk about it because we were saying like no is a full, complete sentence. And whether it's coming from a place of people pleasing or, like you said, a trauma that you may have experienced, and maybe it's wanting to just like stay inside the lines and fit into the box and like stay inside of your label and be the good girl or whatever it would be, right? Let's talk about boundaries for a second. When I think about boundaries, I compartmentalize them in my head a little bit. And I don't know if this is like how you do it, good, bad, ugly, whatever, there's no right way. But for you as a healthcare provider and a service provider, whether you're doing DPT, whether you're doing personal training, whatever, there's kind of like boundaries with clients. Then there's boundaries with social media. Then there's boundaries with friends. Then there's boundaries with family. Like there's just so many different buckets of boundaries that I feel are really important for us to strengthen. Question one, do you kind of see all of these buckets as the same thing? Question two, do you approach all of these, what I'm calling buckets, in the same way? Or are your boundaries slightly different for different areas of your life?
Yeah, so I think this is such a great question. And I love the compartmentalization actually. I've never really thought of it that way, but I absolutely teach it that way now that I think about it. It is first and foremost, I think the root of a lot of the boundaries is very similar, right? It comes down to who you are, what a yes is, what's a no for you. Um, and but as far as how you approach them at work versus your personal life versus like that's going to look a little bit different, but the actual boundaries of like here are the parameters for each component of my life that I am setting, like the actual internal part of setting a boundary is the same.
Mm.
They are straight, like it is an actual boundary. What I'll tell people is like no gates, no gates in your fences that you kind of leave unlocked. Like that's a no-go. You set your boundaries, you hold to them, and you communicate them up front. Now, in the work that I do, as far as boundaries with my mindset coach clients, boundaries with my fiance, boundaries with friends, how I approach them does look similar as far as being clear, like very clear and communicating them up front. And this is where I recognize that a little bit like there is no explanation needed. And I like sharing my whys behind everything. That's just something that I really like doing. And I think when it's something as important as a boundary, when you're first establishing them, it is nice to have them be able to better understand where you're coming from.
Sure.
And the why, like a deeper why, does help with that. So it creates, I've noticed that it creates less issues with people trying to cross boundaries and having to like re-hold them and hold your ground a little bit more.
Yeah.
So did I answer that, or because I kind of
Yeah.
talked in circles a little bit there?
Yeah, no, but I feel like it's the same thing we were talking about toddlers before, kids asking why. And it's like, well, when you give them the reason behind it, it sort of helps with the understanding and processing of it, as opposed to just saying, don't do that or go do that. And so it's the same thing. And actually for me, we've been scaling our team for the past couple of years. It's literally the same thing when you ask someone to do a task on your team. It's like when you explain the why behind it, there's more likelihood for them to have buy-in or curiosity or full autonomy, or there's different as opposed to being a task rabbit. Like I'm not just pushing tasks off to you. I want you to understand why. And so again, it goes back to this idea of why, which is, it's really interesting that the conversation keeps going back to this, because it's not something I think I've been consciously thinking of. But when I think about being self-aware, and if I had to pinpoint it to a word, it probably would be the word why. I always use the word interesting. That's like my favorite word. Interesting. Why did that happen? Interesting. How can I change that? Interesting means nothing about me, but moving on,
it's the
right?
same concept, right?
Yeah.
Like all of self-awareness really comes down to getting deeply curious and being willing to try to figure it out, like figure out the answers for you.
Yeah.
And whether interesting, why, kind of the same thing. In fact, like, why is what I use in boundaries. It's what I use. Hell, I use it in manifestation. Like for me, I can't just say this is the thing that I want. Like I do much better, and works a lot faster if I attach a why to it.
Right. I feel like a common response to why is, I don't know, whether it's internal or external. I mean, being an elementary school teacher for 8 years, that was always the response, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
sure.
know. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's like, but you do know. Just sit with it for a second. Like, allow yourself the
Mm-hmm.
space for the quiet to sink in, because that's where the discomfort is. It's especially visualize right now as I'm talking to you, being in a classroom, right? You're 7 years old and there's 20 kids looking at you, waiting for you to respond. There's a lot of pressure. And so it's really quick to roll off the tongue to say
Mm-hmm.
something like, I don't know, thinking that's going to be I don't mean valid in the way of like worthiness, but a valid response rather than, hold on, think about what I just asked you, find the answer within yourself, within your brain, within your gut, within your intuition, within your Rolodex of information that you have, and then answer appropriately. But the I don't know is this like quick, snappy, like, I just have to answer fast so that we can move on from that. And I personally
Yeah, which
feel
we
as
totally
adults, we
carry
do
into
the same
adulthood,
thing.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100% we do that as adults. One of the most, earlier this year, I was working with someone and I was telling them this exact same thing. I'm like, it's okay to ask for the pause and to say, like, give me a second to think about this. And they were like, wait, what? Like, yeah, just ask for it. Just take those couple seconds, slow yourself down a little bit, and actually be able to think of the response rather than this particular person. She kept going into like a fawn response, and which is can actually mimic people pleasing a little bit. So when we have our sympathetic nervous system, our we always hear fight or flight, but there's also fawn and freeze along with it. And so the fawn response looks very much like, oh my gosh, yes, I would love to. Like
Mm,
it, it's like fawning over someone is like the easiest way to very quickly explain it. When maybe it was actually a yes, but that was the societally acceptable response for that, or the thing that rolled off the tongue the easiest and knew was going to be accepted. And so it was a combination of, you can pause, and if you catch yourself fawning again, ask for the pause after the fact. It's okay. I recognize that you just said yes, and be willing to say, okay, actually, I didn't have time to think that. Can I take a pause for a second?
yeah.
And I think that's so important, to give yourself permission to take that slow down, particularly as high achieving, very driven females. I see this all the time where it's just go, go, go. It's like you're on this hamster wheel that's actually speeding up and can never chills out.
Yeah.
And you're going to have really struggle to figure out what is really meant for you and what you really want if you don't slow down and give yourself the space to actually ask that question.
Yeah, and you're not actually doing anybody a favor. You're creating an unsafe environment for yourself as well as the other people around you. And again, just going back to team, because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm in the weeds every single day with the team. Again, I'm just imagining like asking someone on the team to do something, they quickly respond and say yes, even though maybe they actually don't have the capacity or they don't have the resources or they don't feel confident and comfortable. That then puts them in this spiral of trying to figure it out or being stressed out or making mistakes or not feeling safe to ask for help or say that they don't have the
Mm-hmm.
capacity to do it, which then ultimately can knock the dominoes over in the business. Whereas if you had just taken the pause for a second, and I'm not saying anyone on our team does this, this is something we work really hard on not doing. We're always talking
Yeah.
about this on a team meeting. We talked about it yesterday for like an hour because communication is so important. And it's okay to say, Jess, I actually don't think I can get that done. And then here's why.
Mm-hmm.
And then as problem solvers, the team and I go, okay, great. Well, what if we gave you a VA? What if we gave you this? What if we shifted this around? What if we took this task away? And that's our job as problem solvers, as humans as well. Even if you're not a business owner and
Yep.
you don't have a team, it's like, okay, well, what can we do
Oh,
to
you do
make
this in
this work?
relationships even, right?
Totally.
Or heck, with strangers at the grocery store. Like there's so many instances that I can think of where we jump into this assumption of we're going to disappoint someone else if we don't say yes, or exit, like some negative thing is going to happen if we don't just say yes to this thing and do it. And that's really not the case. Like this seems kind of like a funny analogy, but it's what's coming up right now is, how often do we watch a movie and we can see two people, like we see both sides of it and we see them not communicating, and we're like, if you guys would just communicate, this would all be so much clearer. Like we do that to ourselves constantly
Yep.
by not just taking the pause and communicating clearly and allowing everyone to come together and figure it out, whatever it is.
Yeah. Did you watch Suits?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay.
So I actually
Don't
watched it
don't
when it came out, and then I'm rewatching it again.
Okay, let's not spoil it for anybody. It's such a good show. It's incredible. But what you just said about two characters and seeing two sides of the story, all I'm going to say is Harvey and Donna. The whole time you're like, just
Yep.
talk to each other. What are you doing?
Yep.
I won't tell you what happens
Yep.
in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're like, because you're the third party or this outside perspective, and you're like, why aren't you just having a conversation? This is so awkward. Like we all know. But I guess that's,
Hmm.
also just beautiful, whatever, story writing and directing.
Oh yeah, it's great story writing. And what I'll say alongside that is we all have blind spots, right? So that's what's coming up right now. Is like we get to, when we're watching a TV show or a movie, we get to be that third outside party. We all have blind spots. And so a lot of what I do as a coach is be able to help someone find those blind spots, help them find, and that often is where they are making unintentional assumptions and creating this kind of cycle of unintentional people pleasing and
Yeah.
saying yes and overloading themselves. And it does, it snowballs very quickly.
Do you have something right now in your life, in your mindset, in your work, in your business, that's an unintentional blind spot of your own?
Ooh, it's tough because
You're like,
again,
it's a
blind
blind
spots
spot.
aren't something that we see very readily. Yeah, it's like, ooh. And that's part of why like coaches need coaches, right?
Yeah.
Like I always have someone who I know I can go to, mentor, coach, something to help me see blind spots. It's not my significant other. I'm not going to put that kind of responsibility on him. I'm going to hire a coach who's meant to do this. And right, the one that I just finished kind of going through was like I thought I trusted myself and I didn't realize that I didn't fully. Right? Like so that's why I was in that mentorship with Sam for the last 6 months, was to really, really dig deep and be able to pick apart all the like the areas that were holding on to not really trusting myself. I'll give the example. So I have ADHD and I haven't been medicated for the last like 7 years, because about the time I started finding personal development, I actually found that a lot of my symptoms, like it was like a direct correlation. The more personal development did, the less my ADHD was symptomatic.
Interesting.
Yet it is an actual like neuron issue, right? So
Sure.
there are certain things. And anyways, all that to say, as a kid growing up with it, that was thrown under the bus as the blame. Anytime like I misplaced something, forgot about something, it was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Why can't you handle this? Your ADHD is insane. So that over years created this really deep lack of self-trust. And so
Hmm.
even though I had done so much work, that was a recent blind spot that I realized that I unintentionally went into shame spirals and didn't trust myself if anything went wrong in the business or in my personal life. And so I had to undo a lot of that. So that's the major blind spot that I just finished doing like a huge deep dive on. And I'm human, so I'm sure there's another one that will come up and I'll have a coach that calls me on it.
You're human on the daily, actually, your podcast.
Yep.
Um, that's a really That's a really interesting one because I feel like there's the one layer of blame from, let's call it teachers, society, parents, caregivers, where they can blame it on the ADHD or fill in the blank, whatever that might be. But then there's also like the personal internal blame where I feel like from an outsider, it's probably easy to blame it on that, right? And to not have to take personal responsibility for so many years to just say,
Hmm.
oh, it's just because I have ADHD, or oh, it's just because I'm forgetful, or oh, it's because I'm not good at that, right? And it's like, wouldn't it be easier to blame it on something else externally or even internally than it would to be sit down, hold a mirror up to yourself, and do the damn work?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The radical responsibility, it is next level.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that you have that I love, and we're going to definitely link it in the show notes, is your journal, which is all about exercises around that radical responsibility and personal development and tactical prompts and inspirational quotes and somatic check-ins. And you have so many cool things inside of this journal. So tell everybody what it is, who it's for, and how they can get their hands on it. And we'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, because I know we talked a little bit about my story earlier and how it's been a roller coaster. And this is a great example of I knew without knowing where I was meant to go. So this was actually before I even hit six figures in my business. I created this journal that was a 3 a.m. wake up, get a hit of inspiration, created in 24 hours, maybe 36 hours, and then sit on it for a little bit before finally publishing it to Amazon. And I love this thing. It is taking all of the exercises that I feel like will help you get to really know yourself again, right? So one of the things that I realized when I was my dad's caregiver and through all of this is that I didn't know what I wanted and I didn't know myself. I got to this point where I was looking in the mirror and I was like, who am I? Like, do I actually recognize the person looking back at me? And the answer was no. And that was a hard answer to come to terms with. At the same time, I think that same day, actually, I came across something on Instagram that said, if I were to ask you to list all the things that you love, how long would it take before you list yourself?
Oof.
And I realized that I would not be
Ooh.
on that list.
Oh God, I just got
Yeah.
chills.
Yeah. So this journal is for that person. The person that's, whether it's that they're recognizing they don't recognize the person in the mirror 100%, or if that question just hit them really hard, like
Yeah.
the how long would it take to list yourself? It's for that person. It is to help you come back home to yourself. If we want to get really specific, I definitely wrote it for like the neurodivergent female, but I've had non-neurodivergent males use it as well.
Yeah.
So it's all the exercises that helps you get into your body, helps you figure out what you want, what is really meant for you. And on top of that, I gave 60 extra journal prompts to dive deeper into like more specific areas. And then
So
lots of
cool.
extra blank pages just because that's how my mind works.
Yeah, I love it. Like I said, we'll link it in the show notes. It's so beautiful. I've seen it in person as well. And it's just such a cool tool and a cool resource, even for the person,
Thank
like you said,
you.
who maybe you look at it and you're like, this isn't quite my tool, but maybe you'll pick it up in the future, or there's something that you can take out of it for sure. Before we wrap with a bunch of
Yeah.
rapid fire questions, I'd love you to just pimp yourself out. So where can people find you? How can they work with you? What do you have coming up? What's going on?
Yeah, so I'm really loving all the things that I have coming up. My big thing that I'm doing right now is I have one-on-one launchpad sessions. And what that means is they are meant for you to get the 180 that you're looking for in life in 180 minutes. So it's 90 minutes of pre-work that I give you based on an intake form, and then a 90-minute deep dive call to really, like, the entire premise is to let's get bust through whatever blocks you have and help you get to where you want to be, and clarity on where you want to be, right? Because there's plenty of people that come to me for those sessions and they're like, I think I have an idea. We'll figure that out very quickly in the pre-work. Like I've got a system. We can make that happen really quickly. And so, yeah, those are the 180 sessions. Those are super fun. They're one-offs. And then journal workshops. I kind of mentioned this earlier. So I just did one at a retreat and it was so much fun. And so I really, really want to dive into doing as many of those as possible. And so it's going into, if anyone's listening and you have a mastermind, a retreat, a group, even an online group of any kind, and you feel like bringing some of this journal and mindset work to the group for a one-time guest call or one-time guest session at a retreat would be helpful. I would love to help support you. And yeah, let your crew, your audience dive even deeper into the mindset, knowing themselves and integrating what you're bringing to the table with them.
Very, very cool offerings. And you just gave me a spark of inspiration for something in my business. So I just wrote it down and I want to thank you for that. So these conversations are always so
Yeah.
special. Where can people find you on social media? Where do you hang out most? And yeah, that. Oh, your podcast. Duh. I was like, there's two things.
Oh,
So
yeah.
where can people find you, and tell us about your podcast?
Yeah. So I am super active on Instagram. I mean, I'm on the other platforms, but that's where I am primarily. And it's Move on the Daily. It's always me in the DMs. Shoot me a DM. I love connecting. And then the podcast is Human on the Daily. And it is all about breaking out of the expectations of others and leaning into your true authenticity. And so episodes drop every Monday. That's been a blast. It's just been like a fun passion project that I get more and more into every single week. And it's been so amazing to hear the feedback from everyone on that.
Yeah, podcasting is my favorite because we get to have these cool conversations and they change lives. So it's like double bonus
Yeah.
extra. Yeah. Also, it's Daley, Daley, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Spelled
You
like
ready
my
for
last
some?
name. It's like a running joke. I'm gonna get married next year, and I'm probably not changing my last name just because it's too good. I can't.
It's too good.
Yeah.
I mean, I never legally changed mine. I'm still Glazer. It's very confusing with my current Instagram, but I'm Glazer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a good one. All right. Ready for some rapid fire?
Yeah. Bring it on.
Well, aside from Digital Business Evolution and Human on the Daily, what other podcasts or books are you listening to or reading?
Ooh, okay. So probably not a shocker on some of the podcasts. I love Powerhouse Women. I just listened to Jack and Happy, so Elliot's new show this
Yes.
morning. I love the Huberman Lab. I nerd out over the science on that particular podcast. Everything Joe Dispenza. And then I'm just now getting back into listening things like Earn Your Happy. Even Powerhouse Women, I took a step back from listening while I was building my own podcast because I wanted to create my own voice without having input from others. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, as of like 2 weeks ago, I'm starting to listen to more podcasts. And then book wise, I'm reading Burning the Boats right now.
Oh, how funny that we were just talking about that today. That's really funny. Wow.
Yeah.
What is something that people get wrong about you?
Ooh. Gosh, I just had a couple come to mind. But probably the biggest thing is people feel like I'm always just traveling for fun. Like, I guess it's probably my Enneagram 7 energy that comes off. And she's like, I get so many comments like, oh my gosh, you're just hopping around the world, always adventuring. I'm like, you guys realize like 80% of that's for work, right? And I'm not actually seeing the city that I'm in.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing. I would love to get to a point where I'm just traveling for fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of my traveling, just the reminder, Instagram is glamorized. It's the good, like, if I were to put what I really did most of the days, you would have shots of me just on a computer. Like, that's
Yeah.
not as fun to look at.
It's so
So
boring. It's so boring. We always talk
I
about
love
that,
it.
right? It's
And
like,
it's,
yeah, I mean, Instagram stories put up 10 a day, maybe they're each a minute. It's a 10-minute snapshot out of a 24-hour period. 12
yeah.
if you're considering sleeping or 15 or something. But yeah. $50,000 question. If I were to cut you a check tomorrow for $50,000 that you had to use in or on your business, you could split it up or do it in one lump sum. How would you invest it?
Okay. If I were investing and it's directly in the business, I would assume like no, like 401k stuff.
In the
Okay.
business.
So, um, easy. One of them would for sure be like a high ticket mastermind. That was because for 50K, I could get into one that was probably around like the 20, 30K mark because I don't want to shoot for, right? Like we want to be able to up level, but if I were to try to go for like the Chris Harder mastermind, is that a goal of mine to get into that? Yes. Am I there yet? No. But that money would seriously go very well towards putting myself in the next room that I
Yep.
want to be in and up level to. And then a lot of the rest of it would go towards, I would love to set up some events where I could give back to the community.
Very
Like,
cool.
I'm starting to do some live podcast events, and it would be such a weight off the shoulders to not like even have to necessarily charge for those and just ask for donations. Like, already all the proceeds go towards, I pick a charity for each one, generally local towards women.
Mhm.
And it would be so amazing to just have the resources to really give back in a
Yeah.
bigger way.
Yeah. I love that. It's a huge ethos in our company, giving back. So I love that.
Yeah.
All right. We named the company Digital Business Evolution because we believe you're always growing and evolving. And as you do, so does your business. What is your next personal or business evolution?
Yeah. So again, they're tied hand in hand. It's hell is that ties full circle back into like why I do what I do, right? The mindset is foundational, and finding your joy is also like a huge part in finding success as it's defined by you, not someone else. And so for me, we're finishing up the bus shortly, a converted shuttle bus,
So
and
fun.
taking off for the winter to travel. And I'm just so excited to explore, but also use that as a way to connect with very different people that I might not get to meet otherwise. And anytime I expand like that, the depth to which I can go into my business and grow things also like exponentially increases. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited for that.
That's incredible. I'm stoked for you as someone who did that. We did the RV thing for 14 months on the road.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you because the magic really lies in the in between. And that's what Mike and I used to say all the time. People would ask, like, where's your favorite place? And what was your favorite thing? And it's like, it's the in between. It's the stuff that you wouldn't expect. It's not the cities or the places that you would typically fly to. It's the people that you meet in the random little diner that's been there for 75 years in a town of, 25 people. It's like, it's the in between. So I'm stoked for you guys. Amazing. Meg, thanks so much for coming on today. I adore you. And this was such a fun conversation. We'll make sure to link everything in the show notes. And as always, audience listeners, if you love this episode, the best thing that you can do is take a screenshot, share it on social media, and tell Meg and I what some of your biggest takeaways were. I know I wrote a couple things down that she said. Certainly, if you asked yourself to list all the things that you love, how long would it take before you list yourself? For me, that was probably my biggest like goosebump moment today. So whatever your goosebump moment was, take a screenshot of this, share it on social media, tag Meg at what is it on Instagram?
Move
on the
daily.
Move on the daily and tag me at I am Jessica DeRose. Let us know so we can see what you're loving. And as always, friends, cheers to your evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.